Today's video was made possible by Masterworks. Masterworks is the only platform making it possible to own part of a multi-million-dollar work from iconic artists like Picasso, Andy Warhol, and many more. Skip Masterworks' waiting list using our link below. We'll talk about that more later. Could it be possible that the mobility of the future, the much vaunted electric mobility with all its promises of decarbonization, depends on countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo? Yes, you heard correctly, and no, I haven't lost my mind or anything like that. So remember this name, the Democratic Republic of Congo. Okay, VisualPolitik fans, I am convinced that every time we talk about the electric car, our minds jump to things like the environment, trees, forests, clean transportation, clean air, and animals. That is, if we buy an electric car, we may at some point, perhaps, even see ourselves as kind of a superhero, a brave crusader saving the earth in the face of dirty combustion engines. But what if the reality wasn't exactly like that? Now, before we go on, let's just take a moment, because before continuing, I would like to make a small clarification. Our goal with this video is not to trash the electric car, nor to criticize its technology or anything of the sort. Yes, there may be reasonable doubts about whether or not the technology is mature enough, or whether or not the future will really go with the electric car, but it is undeniable that it has significant advantages, particularly when used in large cities. Now, all of that is true, but perhaps it is also true that advertising and politicians have ensured that every time the electric car comes up, we always bring out its more positive side, which has basically created a kind of mystical worldview around this technology. And precisely for this reason, we believe that we need to talk more about the implications of this technological change, environmental, social, and more importantly, geopolitical implications. And that is precisely why we have prepared this video. So to get started, as always, we've prepared a graph. What you are seeing on the screen is no less than the amount of minerals needed to manufacture an electric vehicle and a conventional vehicle, if we exclude the consumption of steel and aluminium. As you can see, to manufacture an electric car, lots more minerals are needed, approximately 6 times more. And it's not just about quantity, it's also about variety. While the manufacture of a conventional car needs barely any copper and manganese, electric cars also require a significant amount of lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite, and a selection of rare earth metals. This not only makes production more expensive, but also requires much more complex supply chains. For example, in addition to much more mining, more minerals must also be transported from their place of origin to the places where they are processed, and finally, used. And of course, the means of extraction and transportation are not exactly clean. From machinery to ships, we are talking about activities that use lots and lots of diesel. Take note, because this is just the start. Do you want to get to know the less attractive side of the electric car? The side the activists and politicians refuse to tell us about? Do you want to know exactly what the mining transformation that is underway looks like? And what may be even more important, do you want to know who the main players are in this whole mining revolution that is taking place? Of course you do. So, let's get cracking. The ugliest aspects of electric vehicles. Well, VisualPolitik community, as we have just told you, manufacturing an electric car requires 6 times more quantity and 3 times more variety of materials than manufacturing a conventional car. So the question is, what does all this entail? I've got good news for you, because here's another graph. The countries you see on the screen are the countries that, in principle, will benefit the most from mining thanks to the electric car. It is worth highlighting that those have the 4 minerals we can classify as essential: copper, graphite, nickel, and of course, lithium. In this case, among the major players we find countries such as Chile, China, Australia, Indonesia, and also other lesser known countries such as the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country that today has a virtual monopoly on world cobalt. No less than 70% of all the cobalt used in the world comes from this sub-Saharan African country. Do you understand now why at the beginning of the video we said that electric mobility depends on the Democratic Republic of Congo? A country with a terrible history, which, by the way, we have covered here on VisualPolitik. In case you haven't seen it, I'll leave the video link in the description down below for you. But let's not get sidetracked. The fact is that getting hold of all the minerals needed for electric cars is no easy task. We can, for example, take a look at the case of cobalt and the Congo. This mineral represents one of the largest, if not the largest of all, sources of income for the country. To give you an idea, the Democratic Republic of Congo produces more than 95,000 tons of cobalt each year, an amount that was steadily increasing until 2020 when the freeze in world economic activity caused by COVID-19 brought the growth to a screeching halt. The fact is that of the 95,000 tons of annual production, almost 1/5 comes from artisanal and rudimentary mines whose cobalt production is sold mainly through a state-owned company called EGC. As you can imagine, these types of mines, which have proliferated like mushrooms, lack acceptable conditions in terms of occupational safety, environmental protection, and wages. In fact, the miners who extract this cobalt, which remember is essential for the manufacture of electric cars, earn less than $3 a day. And note that we are talking about marathon working days that run from early in the morning until late at night. Many reports clearly label this situation as semi-slavery. However, the accelerated switch to the electric car that is being imposed by public regulations has made it necessary to look the other way with respect to these types of mines, which in most cases are located close to population centers. But that's not the only problem. In environmental terms, which is, after all, the crux of the whole electric car issue, many mines also have a lot of problems. For example, according to a 2021 German report, artisanal mines lack virtually any measures to mitigate the environmental impact of cobalt mining. For example, wells are not decommissioned when activity ceases. There is no waste management, and in many places, increases in radioactivity levels have been detected. And that is not all. In addition, the mineral is often washed in natural waterways that then become contaminated. In many cases, the water sources close to residential environments that then directly or indirectly are used for human consumption. Let's not forget we are talking about sub-Saharan Africa and that water management here is a bit complicated, to put it mildly. Then there is also the problem of uncontrolled dust emissions. Emissions that in dry seasons generate clouds laden with cobalt microparticles that are toxic to humans and cause respiratory diseases and cancer. And remember that we are not talking about isolated cases. Although these irregular mines account for only 20% of production, it is estimated that there are between 150,000 and 200,000 people working directly in them, and more than 1 million people depend on their activity. Of course, none of this is, in itself, the fault of the electric car, but the increasing regulatory pressure in favor of the electric motor has encouraged all players to look the other way. Now, not everything that we can say about the mining revolution is bad, not at all. We can also find many positive things, and one of them, precisely, has to do with the economic impact. You see, many of the countries producing these key minerals will be bringing in huge amounts of money that they can use to try and escape poverty once and for all. That is, as long as there are no corrupt politicians involved, which, let's face it, is a little unlikely. Politicians such as the former president of EGC, the Congolese state-owned company that controls a large part of cobalt production, who was dismissed in 2021 after being found responsible for looting $8.8 billion, money that has basically disappeared. 3rd of December 2021, Congo ousts mining leader in a cloud of corruption claims. The chairman of the Democratic Republic of Congo's state mining company was ousted on Friday after long-time allegations that billions of dollars in revenue had gone missing. Fortunately, it's not all bad news. And in the face of all that we have told you, mining investments are also improving the situation of many families who now have a job and a stable source of income. But at this point, many of you may be wondering, but let's see, Grant, if manufacturing an electric car requires so many different minerals and those minerals are in such poor countries, there must be some more developed country or big companies that control the whole process, right? And yes, you are right. In fact, one country in particular controls much of the production and processing of key minerals for the energy transition. Any idea which one it might be? No? Well then let's take a look. But before we do, there's one word you've probably been hearing a lot over the last few months: inflation. Simply put, inflation erodes the purchasing power of money. Even slight inflation at 3% annually halves the value of money in 24 years. So if your long-term investments are not at least outpacing inflation, you're kind of in a bad spot. Up until now, the usual way to hedge against inflation was to invest in gold, stocks, or even real estate. But there are new alternatives, and we want to show you a very interesting one: art. The art market is valued at $1.7 trillion, and Deloitte estimates that it could grow another $900 billion by 2026. What's more, it's proven to be very profitable. Contemporary art returned 23.2% during periods with 3% plus inflation, aka now. The SP 500 returned 3.8%. In fact, among the great fortunes, it is a very typical bet. Billionaires from Jeff Bezos to Bill Gates have used art as a store of value for generations. And at this point, I'm sure you're thinking, but Grant, what do I care about all this? That stuff is totally out of my league. I'm not a billionaire, Grant. Well, hold on, because that's where Masterworks comes in. Masterworks' mission is to make it possible for anyone to invest in great works of art through fractional shares. With Masterworks, you can buy shares in pieces of art that help protect you from inflation and even make a significant return. Since launching in 2019, they've returned over 30% to their investors every year, which is pretty impressive considering how much of a roller coaster the markets have been on. So it's no surprise that they were recently valued at over $1 billion. Just go to the website using our link below to skip the waitlist and create an account. After that, you can browse their selection of works, like this painting here by Pablo Picasso, and select how much you want to invest. When Masterworks sells the painting, you get your portion of the proceeds. And, as always, in everything related to investment, tread carefully. Nothing is risk-free. But now, let's get on with the show. The battle for the new mining revolution. VisualPolitik viewers, I asked you a question to which many of you no doubt already have a clear answer, and many of you are likely still hesitant. Which country today controls the extraction and processing of the so-called minerals of the future? The United States, maybe? Or the Netherlands, perhaps? What about Switzerland? Well, actually, no. In this case, the answer is yes, I know, sorry, it's not our intention, we have no choice but to talk once again about China. With 1.4 billion inhabitants, the second largest army in the world, the largest industrial production, and a government that has been in the limelight lately, how on earth can we not talk about China? We kind of need to get used to it, because whether you like it or not, the Chinese are going to be more and more frequently the main protagonists of international news. And this case is no exception. Take a look, for example, lucky you, at another graph. As you can see, China controls the processing of almost all key minerals for the energy transition, from electric cars to macro batteries to solar panels. In other words, we can almost say that China controls the energy transition that Western governments want to undertake. As US invests in clean energy, there's a big problem. China controls the supplies chain. Now, the question is, how on earth is this possible? How on earth can China control the processing of minerals that they don't even produce? Well, the answer is actually kind of simple. They have been quicker, or at the very least, they've taken it more seriously. Let's say that the Chinese government had a very clear idea that, given the direction in which we were going, it could be very worthwhile to control both the production and the transformation of these minerals. So no sooner said than done, Chinese companies rushed to buy mining companies like there was no tomorrow. As you can see, we are talking about something like the holy grail of the coming decades, the most sought after, the most in demand, and the most critical resources. In case you're wondering, we've got another graph for you. What you are seeing is no more and no less than how the demand for each and every one of the resources is expected to evolve. And you can see that by 2040, demand for lithium is expected to increase 42-fold, graphite 25-fold, cobalt 21-fold, nickel 19-fold, and rare earths 7-fold. You don't have to be a renowned political or financial analyst to realize what this could mean. The strategic dependence of many Western countries on China will skyrocket. The question is, does this mean that China will have the upper hand? Well, yes and no, or at least not quite at the same time. Let me explain. On the one hand, China controls most of these minerals, so its influence could be enormous. But on the other hand, we can't forget that technological evolution, exploration, and the search for viable alternatives could help to mitigate, but not eliminate, of course, this dependence. For example, we have the case of hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, a technology that we already talked about here on VisualPolitik. I'll link that one for you in the description as well. The hydrogen car, unlike the traditional battery electric car, has a much less intensive use of these minerals. For example, hardly any copper, cobalt, nickel, or lithium are used in their manufacture. It is only more intensive in the use of rare earths, aluminium, and above all, platinum. This material is currently in very short supply, but there is plenty of scope for new operations. And the question is, where is platinum produced? And is it also in Chinese hands? Well, you see, 2/3 of all the platinum produced in the world originates in South Africa and a long way behind in Russia. And this is where the good news comes in for those concerned about overdependence on China. Not a single one of the world's 5 largest platinum producing companies is controlled by the Asian giant. Not a single one. And unless Xi Jinping is watching this video, which, to be fair, he might be, hello, it doesn't look like things are going to change. Today, platinum is controlled by American, British, South African, and Russian companies. So does all this mean that the electric car technology could become something of a booster of China's geopolitical and geoeconomic influence? Curious question, don't you think? Be that as it may, neither Tesla, Renault, or Volkswagen are set to become the major players in the transition to the electric car. Above them all, maybe China. At least that seems to be Xi Jinping's ambition. But having said that, it's now over to you. Do you really think it could be dangerous that China controls the main minerals linked to the energy transition? Do you think that Western governments should do something about it? Would it be a good idea to continue with the hydrogen car instead of the conventional electric car? Leave us your answers below in the comments. And if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to VisualPolitik. Best regards, and I'll see you next time. Xi Jinping, let me know if you were here.